If you follow the news, you couldn't have missed this. Renault, known for releasing many ordinary cars lately, has just brought back one of its most iconic models. I'm referring to the Renault Twingo, returning as an electric model in 2026. Reusing the legendary Twingo name is clearly a publicity move and will likely be commercially successful. But, contrary to appearances, this strategy is actually quite risky in the long term, since it could simply be the small trigger that starts Renault's downward spiral. And I'm going to explain why. Since starting this channel, I always see harsh or mocking criticisms in the comments whenever I view content about a new model. Regardless of car style, model or make, but with Renault, none of that matters for the first time. Everyone seems to be of the same opinion. As soon as the presentation video went online, we saw a whirlwind of positive, nostalgic, even somewhat exaggerated opinions appear. When discovering the car for the first time, you didn't need a marketing PhD to predict the critical success would be huge. At last, a small, charming car that reminds us of a familiar face from our youth. The Diamond logo brand highlights this in its messaging, and the model features the original generation's green color. The small size is presented as a selling point, just like the driving assistance features. All this happens in an idealized Paris, where a group of frogs moves around. What was the first Twingo's nickname? That's 1-0 for Renault, winning support by returning to the Twingo's basics. Reputation success should lead to sales, but only time will tell. But Renault's problem with this car, for once, has nothing to do with range, price, or equipment. The main problem is the Twingo's design strategy, which appears brilliant but could seriously threaten the brand's future. For the Diamond brand, I must admit, I have an advantage in making this video because my first car design job was at Renault. I know the company well, still have friends there, and sent messages to give you a detailed behind-the-scenes look. To really understand where the problem lies, we need to go back a few years and set the context by asking why. It seems smart to relaunch the Twingo. For that, you need to understand the reasons why it became a model loved by so many French people. Some cars are designed as strategic projects, while others happen by accident. The first generation Twingo, released in 1993, was an unexpected car. It shouldn't have existed for the reasons that made it a cult classic. It began with a wild bet in the 1980s. During Renault's difficult decade, the first crisis was the 1979 oil shock. Renault was already struggling financially when sales crashed and profit margins shrank. Additionally, the models aged badly, the lineup was confusing, and the brand took risky bets to survive. The most famous of these was the American venture in partnership with the manufacturer American Motors Corporation. A foolish move launched in a moment of strategic intoxication when Renault thought it could conquer the United States. At the time, we're talking about several billion francs sunk with no return on investment. The darkest episode was Chief Executive Officer George Bess's 1986 murder by Action Direct, causing national trauma. George Bess recently initiated a major restructuring plan with significant budget cuts, plant closures, and staff reductions to keep the group afloat. His final attempt to save Renault led to his assassination outside his home. It's true, it was shocking and caused uncertainty in the company, with a paralysis among managers and a deep sense of injustice both among employees and executives. This resulted in the brand's worst financial losses, leaving the French government, then the owner, unsure of what to do. Meanwhile, Toyota, Honda, and Nissan enter Europe with reliable, modern, well-built cars. As the Diamond faces internal crises, competitors refine their methods, costs, and image. In short, Renault has become an outdated manufacturer. In this chaos, the brand is fragile and overly cautious with its cars, as if traumatized by past mistakes. At Renault, no one dares to take any risks now. We're back at Renault. At the end of the 80s, it was definitely time to replace the legendary 4L, which had gotten pretty old. At first, the project for the new 4L was called X06, and it was supervised by a man who would change everything. Patrick Leclément, Renault's design director at the time. He joined the company in 1987 after working at Ford and Volkswagen with a conviction, if Renault keeps making bland cars, we're finished. His philosophy was entirely new then. For him, a car is not just a technical object, but a cultural expression that must have a personality and, above all, provoke something. Basically, Renaults need to stop being boring. When he sees the initial X06 project proposals, plain boxy designs, he demands a radical change. He introduces the no plan B rule and tells the design team they must work together toward the same goal: to design a friendly, emotional car that smiles, unlike other cars that appear depressed. That's when the project's fate changes. A young, then unknown designer, Jean-Pierre Plouet, later Peugeot Société Anonyme's head of design, will sign the chosen version. Then at Stellantis in Europe, before retiring in July 2025. Plouet pictured a small, smooth, compact rolling egg, drawing some inspiration at the time. Mini Japanese minivans like the Suzuki Wagon-R, Subaru Rex Combi, and Nissan B1 were among the first cute cars. Twingo's name combines three dances: twist, swing, and tango. It perfectly aligns with Patrick Lequémont and Jean-Pierre Plouet's vision. The problem is this fun little car isn't considered pretty by the standards of the time. It's unique, round, with big headlights and a one-box design. Basically, it's a frog. That's scary for Renault's top leaders, since before the Twingo, all small cars were boxy and serious. Even the engineers on the technical team are frustrated by the idea of a completely round car. The design team gradually wins people over with clever solutions. A good example of that is the interior space. Everyone wanted to have a more livable interior space than that of the Clio. The problem is that the Twingo's body is tiny and crash test standards make everything more complicated. The solution came from revisiting a forgotten idea: the sliding rear bench used in some 1950s American cars. This simple idea adds space and a modular trunk, letting you make a bed. This and other tricks make the Twingo highly practical, ready for countless moves. Renault unveiled its Twingo at the 1992 Paris Motor Show, where most cars were grey, beige or brown. It stands out with its patterned interior and its wild colors: coriander green, ultramarine blue, coral red, and Indian yellow. Something new captivates the public. In days, the French adore it and the little frog becomes a sensation. It was worth fighting for this design that shouldn't have seen the light of day, since we often forget. But the Twingo will become Renault's financial savior in 1993, the most profitable car in the group. Above all, one of French popular culture's most iconic products. It alone generates billions and helps fund the Laguna, the Megane, and part of the Safrane. It becomes iconic and hugely successful, but when a manufacturer creates an unidentified flying object and it works, they often panic. To make a sequel, you must recreate the original accident. But accidents can't be deliberately repeated. For me, like all the Matrix sequels, Resurrections to Indiana Jones, and the Crystal Skull, it's often a trap. And you can guess that. If I'm saying this, it's because the Twingo 2 is coming. In 2007, it left behind its round, cute one-box style for a more serious, car-like and logical design. This major change stems from Renault's focus on profitability. The Twingo 2 was built on the Clio 2 platform to cut costs, greatly limiting design freedom. Plus, the brand wrongly assumes people want something more adult. A major strategic error. It was really a Twingo that people wanted, not a small Clio. Fun fact. Renault's push to make international cars at that time greatly diluted the model's DNA. A decent car, but far behind the one it was meant to replace. In 2014, after 7 years and multiple Twingo 2 versions, an incredible event occurs. Renault teams up with Daimler to create a common platform for smart. This brings together several elements that will make all enthusiasts smile. Rear engine, rear-wheel drive, short chassis, and a tiny turning radius. The Twingo 3 becomes a bit more technical, but it's not very clear to the public. The car has strong design potential. Lorenz van den Acker, the new head of design then, pushed to give it a friendlier face and restore its original spirit, without falling into caricature. Ultimately, the Twingo 3 is cute, compact and agile, but arrives when small cars aren't economically sensible. In 2015, the A segment was declining due to regulations, high development costs and low profits. So, small cars are becoming an endangered species. And this new generation of Twingo did what it could, but it couldn't save an entire market segment. At that time, Renault is unaware that another earthquake, named Carlos Ghosn, is about to shake the parent company. In late 2018, Carlos Ghosn, the influential head of the Renault-Nissan-Mitsubishi alliance, is arrested in Japan for fraud. It's a global scandal and public humiliation for him and the group, which loses its 15-year leader in just 24 hours. And if that wasn't enough, the case takes an unbelievable turn. Have you been following? After months in prison and house arrest, Carlos Ghosn escapes Japan hidden in a musical instrument case. This is better than Prison Break at Renault? This affair leads to an implosion of leadership, a brutal governance crisis with a huge strategic vacuum. Within months, Ghosn vanishes, Bolloré is ousted, Nissan pulls back, the alliance falters, finances drop, and Renault loses direction, entering historic turbulence. That's when a new protagonist appears, Luca De Meo. He arrives, launches the Renaulution plan, and quickly envisions bringing back the Twingo. To understand his choice, you need to know who Luca De Meo is. The 58-year-old Italian is not a typical chief executive officer. He's a top marketer focused on making products desirable, prioritizing design and storytelling over numbers and trends. Before joining Renault, Luca De Meo had a career that looks like a best-of the European industry. He joined Volkswagen Group in 2009 as marketing director, overseeing the new Polo launch, then managed Audi sales. He then spent 5 years at Seat, turning around the brand's finances. He oversaw the creation of the Cupra brand, whose first model, the Ford Mentor, made Seat profitable again. Seat hit record sales in 2019. But what happened before that? He made his best move at Fiat in 2007, helping revive the Fiat 500. As marketing director, we all know Fiat's top seller for nearly 20 years. That clarifies everything. The new generation 500 is a global cultural icon balancing nostalgia, modernity, and emotion-driven marketing. Luca De Meo believes that saving a brand means restoring what designers call its primitive soul. It's something instinctive and simple that you feel without explanation, which is exactly what the Twingo One is for him. When he joins Renault, he finds a fragmented, weakened brand struggling in an industry that's become overly serious, anxious, and fixated on technology and regulations. He quickly realizes Renault needs not just new products, but symbolic cars to reconnect the brand with its core strength: ingenuity, closeness, lightness, and a distinctly French popular boldness. Then he suddenly gets an idea. In Renault's history, 3 models perfectly embody this: the R5 4L and Twingo. The R5 and 4L are reborn, but by his logic, one last word is missing. The pillar, the modern icon, the one from the 90s, the one that brought Renault into a new era, the Twingo. But be careful, he knows perfectly well that reviving a legend is playing a dangerous game. The Fiat 500 worked because it wasn't a revival, but a modern car. The new Twingo is the same. It must be a modern take, not a reissue or exact replica of the past. And then there's a second challenge, more strategic and almost political, proving that a small electric car can be affordable, desirable, and profitable. It's a big challenge as city cars vanish from the market. It's complex, the R5, and it's more complex than the R5, and it's a brand that's more complex. The R5 is just part of it. It's actually more complex. That's all.
Yes.
Today, the revenue are in Cannes, in Luske, in Frankfurt. Not everything has to be aggressive or angry, especially a Renault Twingo. Here, it looks just as it should. The old one is most memorable for its upward crescent headlights with flat bases and several ellipses in the center and bottom. For the fog lights and the signature hood air intake, all of that returns on the new model. It already has the same hood air intake, even without fog lights. Below, a graphic element represents both the large plastic bumper and the spot for fog lights on the first generation. It's the classic Twingo style, all curves. But to make it modern, there are subtle lines that slightly sharpen certain key elements to bring a bit of definition and structure to the design. There's an ellipse in the middle, though it's not a grille since the car doesn't need one. Still, the shape recalls the original. What I like most here are the headlights, which are a great example of modern design. Thanks to technology, they're no longer just solid blocks. You find the original shape again with this half circle and the flat base, just like on the first Twingo. For a modern touch, the headlight features body color inside, reminiscent of the Fiat 500. The headlights have 2 levels with large LED bars, which looks good. The side silhouette remains unchanged. Classic one-box design with the A-pillar and windshield coming down in front of the front wheel. And by the way, the wheels are pushed right into the corners to maximize interior space. The old one also had a simple round handle and a subtle light waistline along its length. Whereas on the new one, we have something a bit more dynamic. Rounded and smooth, the surface emphasizes the wheels and creates a curved reflection. We also have the little rocker at the bottom, which keeps that simple spirit and roundness with its end in a half circle. The half circle can also be found at the back in the lights and on the bumper with the 2 pill-shaped pieces, just like at the front, which reminds me of something we saw on the 2007 Citroën C-Cactus concept. The rear window's extruded shape also reminds me of the Honda Z600 and its small city car vibe, but that's just a bonus. You can see the connection is complete even in the details. What makes this new Twingo even more interesting is that it's arriving while Renault's design is facing challenges few can imagine. Meanwhile, another major player has entered the scene. Gilles Vidal, former Peugeot design chief, brilliantly transformed the brand's design. As I explained in this video, Luca De Meo, inspired by his success, calls him. In 2020, he simply crossed the street to join Renault as head of design, bringing some of his team along. It's a near-historic move, as for years a non-aggression clause kept Peugeot and Renault designers from working for each other. When a talent like Gilles Vidal moves, it's noticeable, and his impact is clear in Renault's lineup today. The new Scenic E-Tech features a sharp, almost Peugeot-like design, with slim headlights and nearly Germanic surfaces. Facelifts of several models follow this trend, especially the Clio 6 unveiled late this year, which closely resembles a 208. From the wheel arches to the light integration and rear fender shape, Vidal is taking a more technical artistic direction, unlike the previous style. Based on the life cycle imagined by Lawrence van den Acker, which played on emotion, sensual surfaces, and fluid lines. Surprisingly, Gilles Vidal spent only 4 years at Renault, a brief stint for a designer of his caliber. He just returned to Stellantis, and his departure reveals more than appears on the surface. It's a sign of an internal struggle between two visions for Renault's future. Two philosophers lived together for 4 years. A very technical, very architectural visual style inherited from Peugeot and his obsession with taut lines. On the other side is a more pop and emotional sensibility, which Renault is reviving with its iconic models. Putting both under one brand creates tension, as you're asking the public to see a Renault in a distinct Scenic, then in an R5 with a toy vibe, a Clio resembling a 208, and a smiling Twingo. In itself, each model can be understood, but at some point the coherence gets diluted, and when a brand loses its guiding thread, it also loses its power of evocation. The viewer must work to understand what they see, and then the identity begins to crack. That's when the real problem emerges. The biggest danger for Renault today is a lack of imagination, because by constantly reviving the past, you end up forgetting to create the future. A car brand that stops innovating becomes stagnant or ordinary. Today's automotive industry leaves little room for boldness. Everything is costly, regulated, and measured. Mistakes are costly, so managers stick to proven methods, turning nostalgia into a strategy. It reassures shareholders, marketing, and some of the public, appearing as a return to roots or heritage celebration. It's often just a refuge or a sign we haven't found anything better, but the problem is we end up trapping ourselves in it. After the R5 4L and Twingo, what else could they revive? What other story can Renault tell that isn't just a copy of what they did 30 years ago? Once you've brought back the three biggest legends, what's left in the attic? They could bring back the Modus, reinvent the Fuego, or remake the Nevada. But you can tell that the nostalgia card can't be played forever. Now that Renault has used those three icons, nothing remains. We're at a point where the brand must choose a direction, not just for design, but for ambition. Is it, do we keep living by looking in the rearview mirror, or do we finally start imagining shapes that no one is expecting? Is it, do we accept becoming the brand that just revisits what it's already done, or do we become the brand that surprises again? Renault's strength came from innovation, not nostalgia. The Clio 1 didn't reference the past. The first Twingo didn't reference a 60s model, and the first Espace wasn't a remake. Whenever Renault excelled, it innovated. Now Renault is doing it again. That's smart. In the short term, the R5 is a success, and the Twingo, they're sure to sell tons of them. But in the long run, repeating means fading away. Because nostalgia is a wonderful crutch until the day it becomes a trap. As I was saying, once the three big stars, the R5, the 4L, and the Twingo, are well established on the market, Renault will have no more excuses. The past will be exploited and the attic emptied. The brand must now create a new chapter without depending on a 30-year-old memory. We understand Renault has regained its memory and now just needs to recover its imagination.